In February 1959, 9 experienced skiers set out to explore the northern slopes of Ural Mountain in northwest Russia. The group planned an excursion of only 2 weeks, but as soon as they arrived at their destination, they cut their trip short and began to make their way back to the nearest town. Just 2 days after arriving, the party was found dead, having succumbed to hypothermia. Their tent had been cut open from the inside, suggesting that they had fled in terror. But what had terrified them so much? In today's episode, we'll be exploring the Dyatlov Pass incident, also known as the mystery of the Northern Ural. Hi, I'm your host, and you're watching this channel. Join me today as we look into the unsolved mysteries of the world. Our story begins in the early 1950s when the Soviet Union became increasingly interested in developing its tourism sector. For decades following World War II, traveling outside the USSR was reserved for diplomats and government officials. But as the Cold War began to take hold and relations with Western nations became strained, the Soviet leadership began to encourage its citizens to enjoy life within their own borders. With very little opportunity to travel abroad, vacations were quickly organized within the vast expanse of the USSR, with many citizens opting to spend their time exploring the remote wilderness of northwest Russia. In February 1959, a group of 9 such travelers set out to explore the area surrounding Ural Mountain, also known as the Mountain of the Dead. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, a 42-year-old professor of geology at the Eerie Polytechnic Institute in Sverdlovsk. A keen skier, he organized the trip for his students, which included Zinaida Kolmogorova, Lyudmila Dubinina, Yuri Doroshenko, Yuri Krivonishenko, Semyon Zolotaryov, Rustim Slobodayev, Yegor Maslenikov, Nikolai Thabo, and Alexander Kolevatov. All 9 members of the party were aged between 23 and 38 years old, with most of them being accomplished skiers and hikers. With their level of experience, they believed themselves more than capable of handling the challenging terrain of the region. Before setting out, the group received training in survival techniques and were equipped with military-grade clothing and food rations. They left the relative safety of the nearby settlement of Berezniki on February 16, 1959, heading towards the secluded Ural Mountain. Their journey was long and arduous, consisting of several days of intense physical labor as they lugged their equipment through deep snowdrifts and sub-zero temperatures. But conditions unexpectedly improved after a few days, allowing the group to proceed further into the wilderness. On February 25th, the team finally reached their intended destination. Yet, it seems they were less than impressed with their surroundings, which were not what they had expected. There is some debate over the exact location of the campsite, but recent investigations suggest that the party set up camp in a small ravine near the southern edge of Ural Mountain. The exact reason for their choice of location remains unclear, but it was probably due to the flat terrain making it easier to pitch their tent. Other factors may have played a role, including the hope that the terrain would afford them protection from the harsh winds common to the region. Whatever the reason, it would prove to be a fatal decision. Conditions in the following days were unexpectedly mild, with temperatures fluctuating around freezing. Perhaps in an attempt to make the most of the good weather, the group decided to cut their trip short and return to civilization before bad weather arrived. On February 26th, the 9 skiers packed up their equipment and prepared to leave the camp. It was the last time anyone would see the group alive. 2 days later, on February 28th, the group was discovered by a search party who had been sent to locate them after they failed to return to base. Their tent was found ripped open, lying several meters away from their supposed campsite, as if the group had fled in terror. Of the 9 bodies discovered, 4 were found near the tent, while the remaining 5 had made it several kilometers further down the mountain. 2 of the bodies, those of Yuri Krivonishenko and Zinaida Kolmogorova, were found close to each other on the slope of a hill, as though they had been trying to descend a mountain. Krivonishenko's camera was found nearby, along with his fully packed rucksack. This suggested that the pair had become separated from the group and had attempted to find their way down the mountain alone. But there was no sign of distress or struggle, nor did they appear to have been injured. The remaining 7 bodies were eventually located in a forest clearing approximately 1.5 kilometers from the tent. Their state of undress suggested that they had managed to remove at least some of their heavy outerwear, perhaps in an attempt to lighten their load or warm themselves up. 3 of the bodies, those of Semyon Zolotaryov, Lyudmila Dubinina, and Nikolai Thibault, were found lying face down while the rest were lying on their backs. The latter included the body of Igor Dyatlov, the group's leader, whose trousers were unzipped but otherwise fully clothed. The post-mortem examination of the bodies revealed that all 9 had died of hypothermia. None had any signs of injury or trauma, nor any evidence of alcohol or drugs in their systems. With the cause of death determined to be hypothermia, it seemed clear that the group had become lost and had subsequently succumbed to the cold. Yet this simple explanation did not account for several key pieces of evidence, such as the fact that the tent had been cut open from the inside, that several of the bodies were missing clothing, and that there was no indication that the group had panicked or tried to retrace their steps once they realized they were lost. Furthermore, witness reports spoke of strange lights and noises in the sky during the time the group was missing. Locals even reported seeing a bright orange fireball in the sky, which could have been a meteor. Could something extraterrestrial have caused the group's untimely demise? A thorough investigation into the group's disappearance was conducted, led by Major Ivan Teryoshkin, who had experience investigating aviation accidents. However, the investigators struggled to piece together exactly what had happened to the group. After discovering the partially clad bodies, they initially assumed that the group had become disoriented and descended the mountain, becoming too cold and exhausted to continue, and ultimately succumbing to the elements. But this theory did not explain why the tent had been cut open. In fact, it raised more questions. If the group had exited the tent voluntarily, why would they have cut it open instead of simply unzipping it? And if they had become disoriented, why would they have traveled several kilometers before succumbing to hypothermia? Had they possibly seen something terrifying that prompted them to flee their camp in the middle of the night? While there is no concrete evidence to support the theory, there are several possible explanations. One suggests that the group could have been killed by avalanches. This would explain why the bodies were found partially clothed and why the tent had been cut open. However, an avalanche would have likely damaged the bodies, which showed no signs of trauma. Others believe that the group could have been murdered by a lone wolf, although there is no evidence of a struggle, nor would a wild animal have cut open the tent and removed some of the victims' clothing. It is also unlikely that a local would have ventured into the area at the time, as it was patrolled by soldiers who were enforcing a law prohibiting civilians from entering military zones. Yet another theory posits that the group was the victim of an act of violence committed by members of their own group. While this may sound far-fetched, it is supported by several pieces of evidence. According to reports, one of the victims suffered a skull fracture, although this was not noted in the official reports. If true, it would mean that the group was likely attacked rather than succumbing to the elements. Moreover, the condition of the bodies suggested that they had been dead for several hours before they were discovered. This would indicate that they had died separately and violently, ruling out the possibility of a group suicide or mass poisoning. However, none of these theories adequately explain why the group cut their trip short or what caused whatever it was that terrified them to lead to their violent deaths. To this day, the case remains officially unsolved, though it has generated numerous conspiracy theories, ranging from the mundane to the supernatural. Some believe that the group stumbled upon a secret military base, while others believe that they witnessed a UFO. Still, others believe that they encountered a creature from the woods, a large, hairy human-like animal said to inhabit the remote forests of northwest Russia. It is important to note that the official Soviet investigation made every effort to suppress speculation and rumors surrounding the case. When news of the tragedy eventually leaked to the press, details were scarce and sensationalism was frowned upon. As a result, much of the speculation surrounding the Dyatlov Pass incident is largely the product of rumor and myth. Nevertheless, the case continues to fascinate people around the world, inspiring countless documentaries, books, and films. What do you think really happened to the Dyatlov group? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, thanks for watching.